Philosophically, would you be inclined to kill your one patient to save your five? Anybody in the room? With the train, we had at least 3 people who would have killed the worker. Okay, let me ask you 3. Wouldn't you kill the patient?
We're going to talk about rights, because a lot of people are talking about rights now, and there's a lot of different stories being told. And so we want to sort of scratch beneath the surface and see if we can figure out what's really going on.
But if you are willing to talk to me, then we're going to talk and try and get to the bottom of some ideas. And those ideas focus on the idea of rights. Because both sides in this COVID dispute have claimed the territory of rights.
What was sort of lacking, very much lacking, especially in Canada, which is that, on the one hand, we have the corporate press, which I don't think serves anybody. There's something very, very sorely missing there. And on the other hand, you have academia, which is not very accessible or even very interesting to the average person. And so what we thought was, well, wouldn't it be nice in sort of the classic liberal sense to have an in-between space where people actually could come together and have conversations and engage in critical thought, create well-meaning conversation, which is something that we really, especially, there's been a build-up to this, but especially in the last 2 years, we just have not been able to do.
Let's start at the very beginning. Okay? I want to start with something philosophical. You may be familiar with it. It's called the trolley problem.
There was an expression during the Vietnam War about having to burn down the village in order to save it. And I felt that the public health response was literally killing people in collateral damage in order to save them from a virus they would probably survive, right? So the more I thought about that, and the more I thought about what Bruce is doing, which is talking about what our constitutional rights are, is that we got into that situation in part because we didn't have a remedy. There was a point where I realized that our premier had handed the government to the public health experts, and the public health experts were getting it wrong.
One thing the governments can't do is please everybody all the time. So you do have the authority to make calls to a certain extent. And one of the questions that we're here to talk about is, to what extent do they have a free rein to make whatever calls they want, right? Which is what rights are all about.
In other words, your choice in this single moment is this: do you switch the train and kill the single man? Or do you carry on with what was happening and kill the 5 children? Nick, what would you do?
I mean, the utilitarians in the room would...
Are you one of those?
I don't know.
We're going to try to have a conversation rather than a lecture. I think it's helpful. It's very easy when you're listening to somebody talk to think inside your head silently and think, oh, well, yeah, I get that, or I don't get it, or I don't agree, and here's the way it works. And it's all very well, but sometimes when you have to say it out loud, it doesn't fit together quite as well. And so we want everybody to hear each other think out loud and hear themselves think out loud.
When I look back on the last 3 years of what we've been through in Canada, there's one thing that I think I hold dear, and that is that we need to speak publicly. We need to speak honestly, and I will not give that right up. And that is what keeps Canada on a proper course. And I think part of what we're doing here today is encouraging that process.
We really want to sort of breathe life into this idea that it is okay to talk about things. And what we'd really like to do is to have, because this came to fruition at a time where we really weren't allowed to gather the way that we are today, So it was mainly sharing of written material when we started, essays sort of published online. But what I think would be really nice then is to sort of create more of an in-person, events that are like what's happening today, to sort of create that culture of, well, here's an interesting group of people. This is actually going on, and just seeing where it winds up. We don't know exactly where this will wind up, but it could be. The potential for this is quite huge. To sort of to reinvigorate conversation and debate and critical thinking in Canadians.
It was 5 young people going to die and a healthy patient. I'm going to change that equation. It doesn't make any sense, but work with me. It's not 5, it's 10, or 100, or 500, or 1,000, or 100,000. Stop me when I reach the point where you say, that man's right to his own life shall be thrown out. How many people to die do you need? So pick a number and tell me what the number is.
I actually think there is no number. It doesn't matter how high we can count, because if a person can be sacrificed for the sake of anything, no matter how reasonable it seems, we have nothing. Well, I think it's amazing. We live in a culture a culture of silence, really, that's trying to eliminate not just particular viewpoints, but the opportunity to question and have discussion. And that exercise itself is freedom. Freedom isn't so much something you attain, or it's not only something you attain, but you feel it, you actualize it in the process of trying to attain it. And so gathering together, one freedom that's been limited over the last 2 years, gathering together to talk about freedom, to talk about our charter, to talk about what it is for humans to live a good life, to talk about what we're losing, how to regain them again, is an amazing opportunity, I think. And organizations that were born from this acute kind of oppression, it's like this sort of, phoenix from the ashes. And it's just amazing, giving this kind of space in which we can think about and talk about freedom, but do it together, which is natural, and creating. I think our government, our media, our culture is trying to abolish the public square, the marketplace, in that very Socratic sense. And we are, in little ways, but in growing ways, trying to create our own public squares. And they are probably more vibrant and more engaging and more fruitful than they ever would have been had we not gone through this crisis. So it's an amazing thing to be here today.
Hopefully that will turn into more people sort of subscribing, becoming interested, reading our stuff. But in the sort of medium to long term, like I said, I think where we see a lot of maybe value is being able to bring people together. Because I think online is great, but it is one-sided. And I think there's a lot more to be gained when people are in a room together, talking face to face.
What these institutions do differently as compared with our formal institutions like our higher education, our universities and colleges, is that these institutions are genuinely interested in learning and the open exchange of ideas. And that's what our universities were always supposed to be doing. You go way back to Plato's Academy, and it was just a bunch of people sitting around talking through the perennial questions and issues of their time. And what was the point of talking through them? Well, to reveal contradictions, to try to figure out what was wrong with some of the prevailing opinions, to try to figure out how to reach some agreement, to try to bring clarity, to try to figure out what the right questions are to ask. And none of those things are happening at universities, in government, in media anymore. And those of us, for whatever reason, who feel it naturally, who feel like those things are not only deeply human, but essential for being a good citizen, feel like we can't live without those things.
Ideally, people will be prompted to come to their own conclusions in a way that they might or might not have done anyway, but with the benefit of having to think it through and speak it out, talk it out, I'm not here to dictate anything, but I would like to lead them somewhere to see what destination they arrive at.
Okay, so here we have the story that's been told from the very beginning of COVID. It goes like this. Your rights are not being infringed. You are making a choice, and the choice has consequences.
We just started, I guess, about a year ago or so, and we went from something I would call fairly flat in nature, which is, a website and posting of articles that we found really fascinating, interesting, engaging. And we decided to do live events. And I think part of the reason to doing live events is we want to create community again. And I think we've been atomized, and what we're trying to do is bring us back together.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing because this is the culmination of everything we hope to be able to do. So, we're really excited about this, and fingers crossed it goes well, because this is something we'd really like to continue doing. So we have a website, theideasinstitute.org. You can follow us on Twitter, sign up for our newsletter, and stay posted, because this is something we would like to continue.